Well, the first place I remember really was, I don't know where it was at, someplace between Roby and Success. We lived out under a tree. There was a little shed there, and it wasn't big enough to hold all of our stuff, you know. So my mom said she couldn't cook outside if it was raining. So we put the stove in the shed, and it had a floor in it. It was, you know, but it was just one little shed, and we would put our cots and beds, the bedsteads, up outside under the trees, and we leave the beds out if there was not going to be dew, or if there wasn't going to rain. You know, we could leave the beds set out there outside. But if it looked cloudy, we had to roll the mattresses up, and we'd just roll the whole thing all up together and put them in the shed. So that's the first place I remember where we lived, you know.
And how long were you there?
Oh, we probably wasn't there but a couple of months, you know, in the real hot summer. I can remember being at Grandma and Grandpa Scurlock's, and my mom, Dory is 6 months older than Uncle Wayne, so my mom and my grandma was both expecting at the same time, and Uncle Wayne and Dora they didn't want me to play with them because I was too much littler. My mom would give me candy so I would leave them two alone, let them go do their thing. So I found a box of X-Lax, so I just took this little box of X-Lax, and naturally I thought it was candy. So I went out there and sat in her, and got in her wash kettle. It was an oblong one of those black oblong kettles. I just got in there and sat down and ate that whole box of X-Lax. And when they seen I'd ate that whole box of X-Lax, they were gonna give me a dose of salts on top of that, thinking that the salts would work the X-Lax out faster so the X-Lax wouldn't work. Well, Uncle Jess came home and he says, "You'll kill that kid, you give her a dose of salts on top of all them X-Lax." So he made me chew tobacco till I vomited. He made me swallow that juice, you know, until I got sick and vomited up, and I don't know I don't remember if the X-Lax worked me. That's how little I was, you know. I was 4 years old when I started school. But I started to school in August, and October I was 5. But the reason I did that is because back then the district wouldn't pay for a teacher for a school to teach school unless there was 10 kids in the district. If I went to school at that age, then I would be the 10th kid. So rather than have all the other kids not have to go somewhere else to school, you know, way across the country, well, they let me start to school. So I started school when I was 4 years old. That's why I could graduate from high school at 16. The second year that we was there, when I was in the second grade, then she seated us alphabetically according to grades. Well, that meant that the girl that sat next to me was older than I was. And so one day I gasped off and then raised my hand for the teacher to come and help me. And the teacher thought it was the other girl. and she made her stay in at recess. Nobody could figure out why Lucinda had to stay in at recess. What had she done? And then we moved to, it was just outside, just east of Success, at the Dunn Schoolhouse, and that school building is still standing, but they turned it into a house. And we just lived across the road. It was a dirt road, but across the road from the schoolhouse. And they had a bell outside, and at election time, they would put a poster on this bell. So Ruby and I, it was my idea, so they had a lumber pile there, and so I said, let's go potty on this lumber pile instead of going in the toilet. And we knew from what we'd heard our mom and dad say about the candidate that they didn't like him. So we thought it would be cool to take sticks and just smear this all over his face. And that's what we done. And then we thought it was so cute, see, that we went home and told Mom and Dad, and we almost got a whipping over that. Dad walked for 2 miles to take that picture down, and he knew where there was another picture, and he didn't want the teacher and the people that would come by schools, the school, he didn't want them to see that, because they'd figure out who done it. So he walked about 2 miles to get a new poster and come back and exchange it, throw that one away. We moved to we called it the George place. My dad's uncle, my grandma Watson's brother, George Lewis, he told my dad that if Dad would build him a new house, that he would give him 40 acres. So my dad naturally wanted to do that. And my mom kept saying, you better get a deed made, you better get some papers made, Well, my grandma, she used to tell Dad, say, oh, Uncle, your uncle wouldn't cheat you. But Dad, we lived in that place for 3 years. It took Dad about that long to add 3 rooms onto a little 2-room cabin for us, and then for him to build that new house. And as soon as Uncle George got his new house built, he told us to move, and it was in the summertime, and our garden was about ready to Mom was about ready to can beans, and tomatoes out of the garden, and Uncle George told us to move, and Mom said, well, I don't have nothing canned, but we moved over to Griffith School over closer to Summersville. Dad would cut wood, and on Sundays, then Uncle George, while Aunt Minnie was going to church, Uncle George would go down there and steal Dad's wood. And Mom figured out what he was doing. So one Sunday morning, we never went to church then. One Sunday morning, Mom says, I'm going squirrel hunting. So she took the .22 and went over and sat down in the woods watch where she could see. Sure enough, here comes Uncle George with his wagon. He was going to get a wagon load of wood. And Dad figured out what Mom was going to do because she never went hunting, squirrel hunting on Sunday mornings, you know. So about the time Mom got ready to shoot Uncle George, Dad stopped her. And so that was, then we had to move. We moved from there. There was no relatives close to the Cobble place that we lived close to. When we lived there, they started having the Grand Ole Opry, and we would walk 2 miles on Saturday nights to this older. Dory worked for this old man and old woman. She used to stay with them for, I think she worked for 75 cents a week, cooking and doing their laundry and cleaning for them. And we would walk to their house on Saturday nights and listen to the Grand Ole Opry. I didn't know how to cook and clean anyway, because I never, when I was at home, I always helped Dad outside carrying the wood, feed the chickens and the hogs and gather up the eggs and that kind of stuff. You know, house cleaning wasn't my thing. Then Doris said, you wait for me at the bus station. So I got at the bus station in St. Louis and just sit down waiting for her, and I think she must have already been there, because while we were loading, they was gone, you know. And or maybe I was 12 and not quite 13. Anyway, I was sat there in the bus station till about 3 o'clock, and I said, I'm going to go on home. I'm not going to sit here. And to go home, we lived on South Jefferson, so I had to come from the bus station downtown and go up to Jefferson, which was Colored Town, and get off the bus and get on a streetcar. And while I was riding that bus up there, I said, if there's no street light on that corner where I have to wait for the streetcar, I'm not going to stop in Colored Town in I don't know, it was 41, 42, in that time frame, 1941, you know. I said, because I'm not going to stay in Colored Town just standing on the corner. So when I got off of the bus, there was no street light there. So I started walking. I said, no, I'll have to, no telling how many blocks I'll have to walk before I find a bus stop under a street light. And so, sure enough, it was right in front of a tavern, too. Well, here comes this black guy out of the tavern. Uh, it was all colored in there, you know. And he had asked me, try to talk to me, and I just say yes or no, whatever he asked, you know. I was so scared. That was the worst scared in my whole life I ever was. And so I'd already decided when I get on that streetcar, he's going to try to sit down by me. And so I said, I decided I'm going to sit as close to the door as I can, the back door, and sit not next to the window so he can sit down by me. I'm going to scoot over on the outside so he can't sit by me without climbing over me, you know. So I got on that streetcar, and I was so scared because he went straight to the back. I don't think I was even knew that the black people, you know, was supposed to ride in the back of the bus or the streetcar, you know. I don't think I even realized that. But he went all the way to the back and sat down. And I kept sitting there thinking, he's going, when that, I don't want to ring that bell and give the guy time enough to get up and get to the door before I can get off this streetcar, because he'll follow me, you know. And so I sat there, and when I come to myself, I said, oh my, I've been on this streetcar for so long that I've probably went too far, you know. So the next time the conductor always called out the next street, you know, name, and I didn't know one name from another. Anyway, when he yelled out a name, I just dinged that bell, and, and I was close enough to the door. I hopped off of there. And the guy in the back, he didn't have time. The conductor just shut the door, and he was gone, because they'd drive them streetcars really fast, you know. And so I crossed the street, and when I checked the street names, I was only 3 blocks away from our house. So I said, that's a time when the Lord really helped me, you know, but I sure was scared. I got a job at Walgreens when I was 14. I got a Social Security card. You were supposed to be 16 years old back then before you could get a Social Security card. Well, I just fibbed a little bit and got a Social Security card. In fact, I lost it, and I just went and got another one. So I really got 2 Social Security numbers. But I went to work at Walgreens behind the soda fountain, you know. And this one night, I would work till midnight, usually on weekends, you know. And so this one night, I was going home, and when I got to Grand Avenue, I got off of the bus going east on Grand Avenue, and there's a tavern there, and I believe it was a soldier. He was from California, some guy. Anyway, he was trying to talk to me, and I was tired. I wasn't really interested in getting a boyfriend, you know, that time of night, and I was tired. And so he just kept on. He says, I'll take you home in a taxi. I stand on the street corner. He says, I'll take you home in a taxi if you'll come in here and have some champagne with me. Well, I wanted to, you know, I wanted to taste that champagne. I wanted to see what it tastes like. My mom and dad wasn't Christians, so they used to buy peach brandy and leave it set in the window And when I'd come home at night, I would get me a cup, you know, and pour out just a little bit in that cup. And so I knew what peach brandy tastes like, but I wanted to taste that champagne. So I went in there with that guy and had champagne, and I was disappointed, I tell you. That champagne didn't taste near as good to me as that brandy did. And he took me home in a taxi. And when we got to my house, you know, he started telling me all about himself. And here it is. It's 1 o'clock at night, and I'm tired and sleepy, and I really wasn't interested in what he had to say. And so he told me all about himself, and then he said, and now it's your turn. What do you got to say? And I said, I don't have nothing to say. And he just turned around and left. Oh, so that was a war experience. But we respected servicemen back then. Everybody did, you know. There's a whole different attitude now than. It was, yeah, the summer before we moved to Licking. Dad is related, is a cousin to Orby Ice, and so we was going through Licking from St. Louis to down to Hartshorn, where his mother and sister lived, and we stopped by to see Orby Ice because they're cousins. And so that's when I met Neville and her family. So then when I started to school there, see, I already knew her, and she was dating Warren. And so she wanted me to go on a blind date with Henry, Warren's cousin, Henry Anderson, and so I went on a date with him, and there was Warren. That was the first time I ever seen him, and he always said that the first time he seen me, he knew he wanted that I was who he wanted for a wife. So that's how we met. And the first time that he asked me for a date, I was in town. And after we moved to Licking, I was in town, and him and Henry and somebody else that was in a car, probably Claudius Fudge, but I don't remember who it was. Anyway, they drove up by the sidewalk, and they asked me if I wanted to go roller skating. And I wasn't about to go roller skating with 3 boys by myself, so I don't remember where we went the first time that we had a date, or I don't know. After that, you know, I don't remember what. I know Kenneth, we used to go with Kenneth and Beatrice, and Kenneth had a car, so we used to go with them. Warren always usually had an old truck because he worked in the woods hauling logs, and he didn't think I would ride in it. But we used to have fun with that truck because he'd let me drive it. And we'd go through, when we'd go through towns, he was afraid the sheriff would see. He didn't want the sheriff to stop him, so I would drive till we'd get to town, and I'd just scoot over next to the door. If the sheriff would have seen us, he would have stopped us anyway, because I was over between the driver and the door. Oh. So I always knew that God was real, But then after Warren and I got married, I was 25 years old when we got saved. Uh, it was before you were born. Uh, when I went in the hospital. The nurse came in and she said, she checked me and she said, "Honey, you're going to be here a long time." And I said, "Lord, if you deliver this baby, I'll do anything you want me to." So God works with you any way that he can. That nurse came back in about 30 minutes and she checked me and she said, "Wow." She said, "You're ready to go in the delivery room." And so after you was born, well, every once in a while I'd go to the Methodist church, and Warren would go too. He never fought me about going to church, that much. And we'd take the kids and we'd go to the Methodist church, but I really didn't want to get mixed up in them Pentecostal people. They were just a little bit wild, I thought. And so then it was, we'd go to church and every once in a while, and when I'd get to feeling like I needed to do what I promised I would do, and sure enough I got pregnant with Dale. And then when I started remembering more and more what I'd promised the Lord, So before Dale was born, in November, before he was born, the next April, I said to Warren, we was going to see Jess and Dory in Olive Branch, and I said, "Let's get saved." And he said, "I want to tell you this." He said, "When you feel like you want to get saved, you get saved, because Jess and Dory we knew they was going to go to church, you know. And so I said, okay. So we went to church down there, and that was when I got saved. The Spirit just came down, and I started crying, and Dory was standing right next to me in church, and the preacher was giving an altar call, you know. And so she never said one thing to me, you know. She just let me stand there and cry. And so the preacher came to me and said, "Would you like to get saved?" And I said, "Yes." So he took me to the altar, and I prayed through, you know. So then we started going to church in Wellston. That was when we lived on Shodo. And we started going to church in Wellston, and it was, I have it written down when Warren got saved, but I believe it was in February. I'm not real sure. It wasn't too long, you know.